I always thought my father was a good man, but then I found his plans for my grandfather. I'm talking detailed notes, a step-by-step guide on how to psychologically break him, to make him seem unfit, or to get his hands on a billion-dollar empire. My first instinct was to stop him, to expose him for what he was doing, but I had no idea that stopping my dad's twisted plan wasn't about fighting him. The key was hidden in a secret they had both buried for over 30 years. I am Monique Pendleton. For years I watched my father's quiet anger at my billionaire grandfather and pretended not to hear it. Then I found the plan, a ledger of lies meant to turn Arthur Pendleton into a broken old man so Thomas could take the mansion, the money, and the respect he was denied. This is a revenge story that becomes a search for healing, a black woman who refuses to let betrayal define their family. As she reads letters tied with a faded ribbon, Monique finds not only proof of the plot, but the seed of a deeper wound, a son abandoned by a father's pride. The fight becomes less about confiscating wealth and more about reclaiming a life stolen by silence. Monique's choice is brutal and honest. She will stop the plot, but she will also force both men to face the scar that birthed it. Expect scenes of sharp anger, quiet confessions, and a final moment of truth in a library that smells of leather and time. In the end, revenge is not only punishment, it's the chance to finally tell the truth. Watch part 1 now to see Monique step into the mansion and pull down the box that will change everything. Like and subscribe for daily updates. I am Monique Pendleton. For years I watched the lines on my father's face get deeper, like they held small maps of old anger. He smiled at me the way fathers smile, careful, proud, distracted, but behind his eyes lived a storm. My grandfather, Arthur Pendleton, lived like a king in a mansion that smelled of old books and polished wood. He built an empire that other people wrote about. To me, he was a quiet man who always read his papers at the breakfast table. To my father, he was a monument to everything he had been denied. The house on Maple Ridge always felt too big for real life. When I was a child, it felt like the place where history slept. Now it felt like someone had placed a heavy lid on a secret. I told Grandpa I needed a place to think while I finished a project. He lit up and showed me the guest wing like he was proud to offer it. I arrived with a small bag and a head full of questions I did not yet know how to ask. My father, Thomas, did not like that I stayed. He called a lot at first, short calls that always ended with a quietly annoyed voice. "You sure you can handle it, Monique? He's not the easiest." Those calls sounded like tests. When I would tell him Grandpa had everything under control, he would say, "I'm trying to help." But his help tasted different. It sounded like orders wrapped in concern. The first week I lived in the mansion, I watched small things happen. A phone appointment that Grandpa swore he remembered would later be called forgotten. A check that was missing and then found in a different drawer. I began to notice the pattern of interruptions during family visits. The way Thomas would steer a conversation toward Arthur's memory or his bills, like planting a seed he hoped would grow into doubt. One late afternoon, after Grandpa had fallen asleep in his armchair, I wandered the mansion and found refuge in the library. The library was a cathedral of leather and dust. It smelled like rain on old paper. I ran my fingers along the spines, reading names of books I did not recognize. On a high shelf, behind a row of encyclopedias, my hand brushed something that did not belong, a small wooden box. It was dusty and light, as if the box itself was surprised to be discovered. I tugged it down, and felt my heart hit my ribs in a way I had not felt since I was a child, and someone told me the truth about Santa. Inside the box lay letters. Dozens of them, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper was thin and folded the way old people fold things, precise and a little stubborn. I read the first letter, and my mouth went dry. The handwriting was my father's, but the words were younger. They held hope. He had written plans and ideas and dreams about starting something new with Grandpa. He had inked a future where the two of them would stand together and move their small company into something greater. He spoke of partnerships and risk and a technology idea that would have changed everything. The pages sang with the kind of belief that makes people brave. Then I read Grandpa's replies. The sentences were short and blunt. He signed off with a cool, distant hand. "We stick to what works," he wrote. "Your youthful fantasies will cost us." There was a line that felt like a closed door. "I built this alone, Thomas. Do not confuse kindness with partnership." Something in my chest tightened so hard it hurt. The letters painting the past did something strange. They made the present make sense. I read another, and a story unfolded like a quiet film. A young man full of fire asking for a chance. An older man afraid of risk shutting him out. Pride had walked between them like a third person. I thought about the notebook I had found in my father's study 2 weeks before I came here. The one with notes on how to make an old man seem lost. How to delay appointments. How to sow small doubts until they became a fact everyone believed. Standing in the library with the letters in my hand, the truth was a sharp, clear thing. This was not only about money. It was a long bruise. 35 years of a son's hurt had grown into a plan. Anger rose, hot and fast. My first response was to run to my father and throw the letters at him. To shout and to name every lie. But I thought of Grandpa's soft hands and the way his face folded when he read the paper. I thought of the slow, careful way he once taught me how to tie my shoes. I could not bear the idea of smashing him with the kind of truth that would make him small the way someone else had. So I did the thing that felt both the bravest and the most cowardly. I went back to the guest room, closed the door, and let myself breathe. I would keep the letters. I would not tell my father yet. Not until I had a plan that could protect Grandpa, without destroying the fragile thing that remained between father and son. I would not let revenge be blind. If I needed to fight, it would be a fight with eyes open. That night I made tea and sat at Grandpa's old desk. I placed the letters in a neat line and read them again. Each one closed like a tiny wound reopened and then cleaned. I promised myself 2 things. First, I would protect my grandfather from whatever game my father played. Second, I would find out what pride took from my father and whether healing was possible. I did not yet know which of those 2 promises would ask for the harsher price. Outside, the mansion was quiet, but the air inside felt like a room waiting for the first match. I slid the blue ribbon back into the wooden box and tucked it on the lowest shelf in the library, where it might be seen but would not be thrown away. The next morning, I would begin the slow work of watching, asking gentle questions, and keeping 2 men alive in a way that did not give one the power to end the other. If revenge came later, it would be precise. If forgiveness came, it would be earned. For now, the house kept its secrets, and I kept my promise to the letters that smelled like hope and old pain. Morning light poured through the tall windows like soft gold. Grandpa Arthur was already awake, reading the newspaper with his glasses halfway down his nose. His tea sat untouched. I watched him for a moment, the calm rhythm of his breath, the steady way his eyes moved over each line. There was no sign of confusion, no sign of the decline my father kept warning me about. "Morning, Grandpa," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Morning, sweetheart," he replied. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded. "Like a rock," he smiled. "Then it's going to be a good day. It should have been simple." But I had spent the night reading those letters over and over. Now every word in the house carried 2 meanings, one for love and one for pain. When I made breakfast, I noticed another small thing. My father's name flashed on the caller ID of the kitchen phone. Grandpa looked at it and frowned. "Not now," he said quietly. "He always wants to talk business at breakfast." He didn't pick up. That single action told me more than any letter could. There was still anger between them, a thick wall built from pride and old wounds. After Grandpa went for his morning walk, I searched the study. I told myself I wasn't spying. I was protecting. On the desk, neatly stacked, were bills, letters, and an envelope with my father's handwriting. The envelope was unopened. I slid it closer and felt a knot form in my chest. Inside were printed forms, guardianship papers. My father had filled them halfway. His name was written under petitioner. Under respondent, it said Arthur Pendleton. I sat down hard. The room felt smaller. It wasn't just a plan anymore. It was in motion. My father wanted legal control of everything, the mansion, the accounts, even Grandpa's medical decisions. And he was close. The next day, my father arrived without warning. His car pulled up the long driveway, black and perfect like everything else he owned. I stood at the door as he stepped out, smiling the way people do when they want to hide teeth. "Monique," he said, kissing my cheek. "Taking care of the old man?" "Yes," I replied. "He's fine." "Fine?" He raised an eyebrow. He told me last week he misplaced his medicine twice. That's not fine, sweetheart. He found it both times, I said quickly. Dad sighed, pretending patience. You're young, honey. You don't see how these things go. It starts small. Forgetting keys, misplacing pills. Then one day he leaves the stove on and the whole place burns down. He walked inside like the house still belonged to him. Grandpa came from the study, smiling, polite but distant. Thomas, he said, you didn't call. Wanted to surprise you, Dad replied. The air thickened. I watched them talk, small words that hid old hurts. My father asked about the company, the estate taxes, the accounts. Grandpa deflected each question. They both wore smiles that didn't reach their eyes. When Grandpa excused himself to rest, Dad turned to me. You need to keep an eye on him, he said. Write down anything strange. I'll handle the paperwork. I stared at him. Paperwork for what? He looked at me for a long moment, like he was choosing between honesty and strategy. Then he said softly, for protection. For the family. I wanted to scream for control, but I just nodded. When he left, the house seemed to exhale. Grandpa came back and sank into his chair. He means well, he whispered, though his voice carried no conviction. I sat beside him. Why don't you let him in more, Grandpa? Maybe if he knew the whole story. He shook his head. Your father doesn't want stories. He wants to rewrite them. That night I couldn't sleep. I opened my notebook and started writing everything I saw, every phone call, every odd change, every paper. I didn't know if I was building evidence or a diary, but it felt right. I also began to watch the small things my father's people did. The maid he had hired without asking Grandpa often forgot mail on the wrong desk. A nurse he recommended insisted on changing Grandpa's medication schedule. The pattern was forming. Slow, clever manipulation. 2 weeks later, the nurse made a mistake. She gave Grandpa the wrong dosage, just enough to make him dizzy and confused for a few hours. Dad called right after. You see? He's slipping, Monique. It's not safe. I wanted to tell him the truth, that the nurse's mistake wasn't an accident, but I needed proof. That night, I searched the nurse's bag when she stepped outside to take a call. I found a small envelope with my father's initials on it, TP. Inside, $50 bills. My stomach turned. I snapped a picture on my phone and slipped it back exactly as I'd found it. When she returned, I smiled politely and said, You left the back door open. She froze for a moment, then muttered something and went upstairs. I knew she felt my eyes on her. Later, I sat in the dark hallway outside Grandpa's room listening to his slow breathing. I realised what I had become, a watcher in my own family, hiding truth from both sides. The line between protection and revenge was blurring. In the dim light, I whispered to myself, You can't fight fire with silence. You need to plan. The next morning, I made a decision. I would gather enough evidence to expose my father, not with noise, but with truth so clear no one could twist it. But something deep inside me still hurt for him. Because in those old letters, I had seen the boy he once was. Maybe part of him still believed this was the only way to get his father's respect. Maybe that's why it hurt so much, because somewhere under the greed lived a child still waiting to be seen. And maybe, before the end, I would make him see that too. The morning after the nurse's mistake, the mansion felt heavier. I could feel the weight of secrets in the air, quiet, invisible, but impossible to ignore. Grandpa slept late, his breath soft, his hands twitching like he was still chasing dreams that belonged to a younger man. I made breakfast and watched the sunlight move slowly across the marble floor. Every sound, the clock ticking, the spoon hitting the cup, felt louder than usual. I checked my phone again, looking at the photo I took of the envelope with my father's initials. It was the first real proof, but it wasn't enough. I needed to make sure no one could call it a misunderstanding. That's when I remembered the security cameras in the mansion. Grandpa once told me they stopped working years ago after a lightning storm. I went to check anyway. The small black camera in the corner of the hallway had a faint red light. It was on. Someone had reactivated them. I climbed onto a chair and looked closer. A small sticker read, Installed by TP Security Systems. My heart skipped. My father had his own private security company. He didn't repair these cameras to protect Grandpa. He did it to watch him, and maybe to watch me. I went straight to the study. The monitor on the corner table was dark, but when I pressed the power button, it flickered alive. And there it was. The hallway outside Grandpa's room, the kitchen, the library, and even the guest wing where I slept. I stared at the screen until my reflection stared back. Then I noticed the small green icon at the top, remote access active. He was watching everything. I unplugged the monitor and yanked out the cords. My hands shook. For the first time, I understood just how far my father had gone. This wasn't only about power of attorney or control of a will, it was surveillance, manipulation, and fear disguised as care. When Grandpa woke up, I tried to act normal. We had breakfast together. He told me stories about his early days, about how he built his business with discipline and no shortcuts. But as he spoke, I could see it now, the part of him that created my father's bitterness. Discipline can look like love until it becomes a cage. After breakfast, I excused myself and went outside to the garden. I needed air. The air smelled like wet grass and roses. But peace didn't last long. The nurse was there too, pretending to water plants. Her eyes darted toward me and then away too quickly. "Morning," I said softly. "Morning," she replied, voice tight. I stepped closer. "You left something on the kitchen counter yesterday." Her face went pale. "What thing?" "An envelope," I said, watching her carefully. "With initials. TP." She froze, gripping the watering can too hard. "You shouldn't go through people's things," she said. "And you shouldn't take money to hurt people," I replied. The words hung between us like a blade. "I didn't hurt anyone," she said quickly. "I just follow instructions. You don't understand the kind of man your father is." I took a deep breath. "Then help me understand." Her eyes softened for a second. "He said your grandfather was losing it. He said the best thing was to let him rest, to let him step down quietly. He told me this was mercy." "Mercy. That word burned my throat. Did he tell you to switch the medicine?" I asked. She hesitated. "He said the dosage would calm him. That's all. I didn't know it would make him dizzy." "You knew enough," I whispered. She turned away, trembling. "You shouldn't be here." "You'll only get hurt. Your father has plans you don't want to see." I felt a strange sadness for her. Maybe she thought she was helping. Maybe she was scared. Either way, I couldn't let her continue. "You're leaving today," I said. "No more shifts." "I'll tell Grandpa you got a new job offer." Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. She nodded once and walked away. I went back inside, locked the doors, and called a repairman from the town to check the cameras. When he arrived, he said quietly, "These are connected to a private network, Mom. Someone's been accessing them from another location." I thanked him and told him to disconnect every wire. When he left, I sat in the dark study and whispered to myself, "You wanted control, Dad. Now I control the truth." But that night, something unexpected happened. As I walked past the hallway near Grandpa's room, I noticed a faint flicker of light, not from a lamp, but from the reflection of a lens. Another camera, a new one. I pulled out the small device from behind a painting. It was modern, small, and not part of the old system. And this one had a blinking blue light. It wasn't connected to my father's network. Someone else was watching. My pulse raced. I checked every corner of the hallway. No other devices, no wires leading to the study. Whoever had placed this camera had done it recently, and they wanted to stay hidden. I took it to my room and connected it to my laptop. The feed opened instantly, showing saved clips of me walking through the house, reading letters in the library, even talking to the nurse outside, and then one clip made me stop breathing. It showed my father in the study 3 nights ago, but he wasn't alone. Another man stood beside him wearing a dark suit. The man's voice was deep and calm. "Once you have control," he said, "we'll move the funds overseas. No one will trace it." My father nodded. "And Monique?" "Don't worry about her," the man said. "By the time she realizes what happened, she'll think it's all legal." I paused the video. My whole body felt numb. This wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. It was a conspiracy. A bigger one than I had ever imagined. I knew what I had to do next. Get proof of who that man was. And why my father was working with him. And most of all, why someone else had placed this secret camera. Because whoever did might just be on my side. The next morning came heavy and grey. The sky looked like steel. The air felt tense, like even the wind was waiting for something to happen. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that video. My father standing beside a stranger, plotting to move money that didn't belong to him. The thought that chilled me most wasn't the money. It was the way my father had said my name. And Monique? Like I was a problem, not a person. I sat at the edge of my bed with the small camera in my hand. Whoever placed it here wasn't random. They had access to the mansion. They knew where I'd be. Someone was trying to send me a message. By the time I walked downstairs, Grandpa was already at the dining table, dressed sharp in a navy sweater and clean white shirt, reading the morning paper. But there was something off, a small crease between his eyebrows. "Morning, Grandpa," I said softly. He folded the newspaper halfway and looked up at me. "Morning, sweetheart. Did you know someone came here late last night?" My pulse jumped. "What do you mean?" "The security light by the back door turned on twice," he said. When I checked, no one was there. But I could swear I heard footsteps in the hallway later. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was the nurse coming back for her things. He shook his head slowly. No, these were heavier steps. I forced a smile. Maybe just the wind. But I knew it wasn't. I waited until Grandpa went to his room for a nap, then opened my laptop again. I replayed the video. The man in the suit stood beside my father, his face half hidden by shadow. I zoomed in. His voice was familiar. Steady, formal, the kind that didn't need to shout to make people listen. And then it hit me. Mr. Caldwell, Grandpa's longtime attorney. The one who handled every family trust, every estate document, every will revision. He was the man in the video. I felt the ground move under me. If Caldwell was helping my father, that meant this plan wasn't just emotional, it was legal. They were preparing everything so that, when Grandpa's mental capacity came into question, the papers would be ready, signed, sealed, and impossible to reverse. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was theft with the mask of family concern. I needed help. Someone who wasn't in their circle. I remembered one name, Ava Mitchell, Grandpa's former assistant. She had worked with him for 20 years before retiring. She was like a second daughter to him. I found her number in an old contact list on the study desk and dialed. "Hello." Her voice came soft and warm. "Miss Mitchell?" "It's Monique Pendleton." There was a pause. "Oh, Monique, dear. I haven't heard that name in so long. How's your grandfather?" "He's okay," I said carefully. "I actually called because I need to ask you something. Do you remember Mr. Caldwell?" Another pause, then a sigh. "I remember him very well. Your grandfather trusted that man too much, but I always felt something off." "What's going on?" I hesitated. "I think he's working with my father." I found proof. "And now someone's been watching us and secretly. Watching you?" she repeated, voice suddenly sharper. "Monique, listen to me carefully. Go to your grandfather's old office upstairs. Behind the portrait of your grandmother, there's a small safe built into the wall. The code is his birth year. Inside, you'll find an envelope labelled C. Take it and read everything. Don't trust anyone until you do. Why didn't you tell anyone before?" I asked. "Because your father fired me before I could," she whispered. "Now go, child, before it's too late." The call ended. I went straight to the office. The portrait of my grandmother hung above the old writing desk, her soft eyes looking like she knew secrets too. I moved the frame aside and there it was, a small steel safe. I typed the birth year. The lock clicked open. Inside was an envelope, yellowed and thick. On the front, in Grandpa's bold handwriting, it said, "Caldwell Contingency." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents, copies of emails, letters, and legal memos. They painted a hidden story. 5 years ago, Caldwell had tried to convince Grandpa to add a protective clause to his will, one that would automatically transfer decision-making to a trustee in case of cognitive decline. That trustee was supposed to be Thomas Pendleton, my father. Grandpa had refused. He wrote at the bottom of the last page, "This clause is unnecessary. My affairs remain my own until my final breath." Caldwell must have kept those drafts and shown them to my father later. Together, they were building a fake version of the will to make it look official, and the camera. Maybe Caldwell placed it. hoping to monitor progress. Or maybe someone else found out about them and decided to warn me. That thought gave me chills. I tucked the papers into my bag and locked the safe again. As I turned around, I froze. A shadow moved past the doorway. "Who's there?" I called out. Silence. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The hallway was empty, but a faint smell lingered. Cologne, the same kind my father wore. I ran to the window just in time to see a black car leaving the driveway. My father, he had been here, and he had probably seen me holding the envelope. I locked the office door and called Ava again, but this time she didn't answer. I tried twice. Then a text appeared on my screen from an unknown number. "You're getting too close. Stop digging before you make things worse. For him and for you." No name. No signature. Just the message. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Whoever sent that message wasn't bluffing. I had crossed a line, but I wasn't backing down. For the first time I felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. My father's love had turned to greed, his pride to poison, but mine would turn to fire. If he was willing to destroy Grandpa for an empire, I was willing to burn the empire to save the man who built it. The day my father came back, the sky was too bright. The kind of brightness that makes shadows sharp. I had barely finished breakfast when his car rolled up the driveway again. Same black shine, same calm threat behind the wheel. Grandpa was sitting in the living room reading an old photo album. When he heard the door open, he didn't even look up. "He's early," he murmured, voice low. I stood in the hallway as my father stepped in, holding his phone like it was a weapon. His smile was tight. "Morning, sweetheart," he said. "You've been busy." The way he said it made my heart drop. He knew. "Just helping around the house," I said carefully. "Helping," he laughed softly, "by opening safes that don't belong to you." The blood drained from my face. "You were spying on me. I've been watching to protect you," he said smoothly. "You don't understand how dangerous it gets when old money is involved. People twist stories." I crossed my arms. "I saw the documents, Dad. You and Mr. Caldwell planned to fake Grandpa's will." He didn't blink. Caldwell went too far. "But everything I've done, everything, was for the family. Your grandfather is losing control. Someone has to keep the empire safe." I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "Safe from who? From him or from you?" His jaw tightened. "You think you're the hero here? You've always believed your grandfather's version of everything. Do you even know what he did to me?" I hesitated. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper, a letter yellowed with age. "You found his side of the story. Now read mine." He handed it to me. The handwriting was his, younger, rawer. "Father, you broke me before I could prove myself. You called me reckless because I wanted to build something bigger. You said I wasn't ready, but you never gave me the chance to be. Every idea I had, you crushed it. You didn't want a son. You wanted a copy of yourself." The letter ended without a signature. I felt a strange ache. "Why didn't you ever tell him this?" He looked away. "Because he wouldn't have listened. Because I thought success would make him see me. And it did, just not soon enough." For a moment his voice almost broke, and for a flicker of time I saw the same hurt boy from those letters in the library. But then his eyes hardened again. "I built my own company from nothing," he said quietly. "And still I wasn't enough. So yes, I decided to take what he never wanted to give me. Power, respect, control. By destroying him." I asked. He sighed. "You don't understand, Monique. When you've been denied your whole life, you stop asking nicely." Before I could respond, a soft voice came from behind us. "Enough." Grandpa was standing at the doorway, holding his cane. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his eyes were steady, sharp. "Arthur," my father began, but Grandpa raised a hand. "I heard everything," he said. "You wanted control, Thomas. You always did. But what you never learned was that control without honor is just greed dressed in a suit." Dad's lips tightened. "I did what you forced me to do." Grandpa's voice was calm, but the words carried weight. "I forced you to work, to earn. I didn't force you to betray. I was trying to protect the legacy," Dad snapped. "You left no plan, no transition." "I left integrity," Grandpa interrupted. That should have been enough. The silence after that was painful. The air between them was thick with years of words left unsaid. Then Grandpa looked at me. "Monique, my study drawer, the bottom one. Bring the envelope." I obeyed. Inside was a white envelope labelled Final Revision, to be opened only if. He handed it to my father. "Read!" My father tore it open. His eyes moved across the page. Then his face changed, to first confusion, then disbelief. "What is this?" He whispered. Grandpa said quietly, "It's my real contingency plan. Signed with my attorney before Caldwell came along." I leaned closer. The paper stated that upon any legal challenge to his mental capacity, temporary control of the estate would pass, not to Thomas Pendleton, but to Monique Pendleton. My father froze. "You gave it to her?" Grandpa nodded. "You taught me long ago that ambition without empathy becomes poison. She has both. That's why she'll protect this family when I'm gone." My father's face turned pale. "You think she'll protect you?" "She's been recording everything. She's building a case against her own father." I held my ground. "No, Dad, I'm building a case for the truth." He laughed bitterly. "You sound just like him." Grandpa smiled faintly. "Then maybe I did something right." My father threw the letter on the table. "This isn't over," he said. "You both think you've won, but you have no idea how deep this goes. Caldwell isn't the only one involved." "What do you mean?" I demanded, but he was already walking away. "You'll find out soon enough." The door slammed. I turned to Grandpa. What did he mean by that? Grandpa's expression darkened. Caldwell wasn't acting alone. "There's a network. People who've waited for years to see this estate fall apart so they could buy what's left. Your father may think he's in control, but he's a pawn now." I felt the floor tilt under me. "Then we're not just fighting him." "No," Grandpa said softly. "We're fighting everyone who taught him to measure worth in money." He placed a wrinkled hand over mine. "Monique promised me something. Don't let hate turn you into him." I nodded, but my heart was full of fire. "I promise I'll fight fair, Grandpa. But I will fight," he smiled, tired but proud. "Then you'll do what neither of us could. End this cycle." That night I walked through the mansion alone. The halls were quiet, but I could feel eyes on me. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe the other side had already started watching again. Before going to bed, I opened my laptop and saved every document, every recording, every photo into an encrypted folder labelled Pendleton Truth. Then I sent a copy to a cloud drive only I could access. If anything happened to me, the world would know everything. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled. I looked out at the dark driveway and saw 2 headlights flash once, then vanish. He wasn't gone. He was waiting, and I was ready. 2 days passed after the confrontation, but peace never came. The mansion felt quiet, yet uneasy, like it was holding its breath. Grandpa spent most of his time in the study, reading the old ledgers as if they were holy books. I stayed close, afraid to leave him alone for long. The silence broke on the 3rd morning. I was in the kitchen making tea when Grandpa called out sharply, "Monique!" "Come here." I ran into the study. He was staring at his computer, his face pale. "Look," he said, pointing to the screen. The numbers on the banking dashboard made my stomach twist. Every account, personal, business, investment, showed the same message. Temporarily frozen, pending verification. I grabbed my phone and tried to access the secondary account under my name. "Same thing. Locked. They're moving faster than I thought," Grandpa said quietly. "He's already filed something." I swallowed hard. "You mean Dad?" He nodded. He must have used those fake documents. Caldwell had drafts of the will, enough to confuse the system. They've placed a hold until they can confirm who has authority. I took a deep breath. "Then we'll show them the truth." Grandpa gave a small, weary smile. "You have your grandmother's courage. But this isn't just about courage, my dear. This is about power. And power doesn't care about truth, only proof." I called the bank immediately. The manager, a polite man with a cold voice, said, "Ms. Pendleton, according to our records, your father has filed an official request citing cognitive decline. Until the court resolves it, we can't release any funds." "Cognitive decline?" I repeated. "My grandfather is sitting right here, fully alert." "I understand, Ma'am," the man said. "But there's medical documentation attached." "What documentation?" He hesitated. From Dr. Harold Reeve. I froze. Dr. Reeve, Grandpa's old physician. The one my father had introduced years ago. I hung up, fury rising in my chest. He's using Grandpa's doctor, I said. He must have forged a report. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Thomas always knew which strings to pull. No, I said firmly. He knew how to manipulate people, but he's not unstoppable. That afternoon I drove straight to Dr. Reeve's clinic. The waiting room was quiet, filled with the sterile smell of disinfectant. When the receptionist saw me, she smiled politely. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's urgent. A few minutes later, Dr. Reeve appeared, older now, his grey hair neatly combed, his face unreadable. Monique, he said softly. It's been a long time. Too long, I said. You filed a report about my grandfather's mental health. He hesitated. Your father brought me documents. He said it was time to make sure your grandfather's affairs were in order. Did you even see my grandfather? I asked sharply. He looked away. No, but your father said, stop. My voice cracked with anger. You wrote a medical report for a man you haven't examined in months. His silence was enough. I stepped closer. You're going to fix it. You're going to tell the court this report is false. Or I swear I'll make sure every journalist in Atlanta knows what you've done. He swallowed hard. Monique, please, I'm not asking, I said. I'm done watching men like you destroy good people for money. He nodded slowly. I'll make it right. But you have to understand, your father's influence goes deep. Caldwell isn't the only one. There are people behind them, investors who want that estate liquidated. They don't care who gets hurt. Who are they? I demanded. He shook his head. If I tell you, they'll come for me too. I stepped back, my pulse racing. Then pray I never find out you're lying. By evening I was back at the mansion. Grandpa was sitting by the window staring out at the long driveway. I called a few people, he said quietly. Old friends, partners? Some wouldn't even answer. The rumours have started. That I'm sick, that I've lost control. Your father's already poisoned the circle. I sat beside him. Then we'll show them proof. He looked at me. And how will we do that? I thought for a moment, then said, by fighting like him, but cleaner. We'll use his own moves against him. That night I started to build a plan. I uploaded copies of every document to multiple drives, one under my lawyer friend's name in DC. Then I opened my father's company website and began tracing the connections. The same corporation name kept appearing on hidden pages. Hollow Creek Holdings, I searched it. The address led to a shell company registered in Delaware, owned by C&T Investments, Caldwell and Thomas. It was all right there, the fake legal front they were using to move the family assets once control shifted. I printed every page, highlighted every name, and placed them in a new folder labelled Proof Phase 1. The house was quiet when I finished. Only the ticking clock kept me company, but something about the quiet didn't feel safe anymore. I got up, walked to the window, and froze. A car was parked down the hill, engine off, lights dim. I turned off the lamp and watched from the shadows. A figure stepped out, tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark coat. He looked straight at the house, then at the upper window, at me. My phone buzzed. A new message from the same unknown number. You think you're saving him, but you're just speeding it up. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and saved it to the folder. Whoever was behind this wanted me scared. But fear was fuel now. I turned to Grandpa. We're not running anymore, I said. Tomorrow we fight back. He looked at me, tired but proud. You really are your grandmother's fire? I smiled faintly. Then let's burn their lies to the ground. The courthouse smelled like paper and old wood. The kind of smell that holds too many stories. Grandpa sat beside me, calm but pale. His hand shook slightly as he adjusted his glasses. I could tell the long drive had tired him, but his eyes still carried the same quiet power. A man who had built something from nothing and refused to be erased. Our lawyer. Ms. Green leaned over and whispered, They'll try to prove he's unfit. Stay calm, answer only what's asked, and don't react to your father's provocations. I nodded. My heart was racing anyway. Across the aisle, my father sat with Caldwell. Both looked too confident. Caldwell's smirk carried the smugness of a man who thought he'd already written the ending. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The silence was heavy, like a curtain lowering before a final act. The clerk read the case. Pendleton vs. Pendleton, petition for guardianship. And control of assets, it sounded cold, legal. Nothing like what it really was. War for the soul of a family. The hearing began. Caldwell spoke first, smooth as oil. Your Honour, my client, Mr. Thomas Pendleton, is concerned about his father's well-being. Mr. Arthur Pendleton, while respected, has shown recent signs of confusion, missed financial obligations, and misplaced trust in outside influences. Outside influences. That was me. I clenched my fists under the table. Ms. Green stood. Your Honour, the respondent, Mr. Arthur Pendleton, is of sound mind and body. The allegations are unsubstantiated and malicious. We will present clear evidence that this petition is a coordinated attempt to seize control of family assets through deception. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Holloway, nodded slightly. Her eyes were sharp and unreadable. Proceed. Caldwell called the first witness, Dr. Reeve. My stomach dropped. I thought he had agreed to fix his report. He walked to the stand, avoiding my eyes. Dr. Reeve, Caldwell began, please confirm your medical evaluation. Dr. Reeve's voice was low. According to my records, Mr. Pendleton displayed cognitive disorientation during several interactions. I stood up. That's a lie. Miss Pendleton, sit down, the judge warned. I sank back, furious. Ms. Green rose. Doctor, when was your last in-person examination of Mr. Pendleton? He hesitated. Approximately 6 months ago. And this report, Ms. Green said, holding up the paper, was dated 2 weeks ago. So, you submitted a report on a patient you hadn't seen in half a year? Silence. Answer the question, Doctor, the judge said. Dr. Reeve swallowed. Yes. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ms. Green continued. And who provided the information for that report? Dr. Reeve glanced toward my father. Mr. Thomas Pendleton. Ms. Green smiled faintly. No further questions. My father's jaw tightened. Next, Ms. Green called me to the stand. I took a deep breath and faced the courtroom. The lights were too bright. Ms. Pendleton, Ms. Green said gently. Can you tell the court what you discovered in your grandfather's home? I described everything. The hidden cameras, the fake documents, the nurse's confession, the envelope in the safe. I showed printed proof of Hollow Creek Holdings and explained how my father and Caldwell planned to funnel assets overseas. Caldwell objected 3 times. The judge overruled each one. Finally, I ended with, my grandfather may be old, but he's not broken. He built everything they're trying to steal, and if protecting him makes me the enemy, then so be it. The courtroom was silent. The judge turned to my father. Mr. Pendleton, would you like to respond? He stood slowly. Your Honour, I'm not the villain here. I'm a son trying to protect what's left of my family's legacy. My daughter is emotional. She's been manipulated by a man who's losing grip on reality. I stared at him. His words were rehearsed, perfect, the kind that sound noble until you see the poison underneath. Then Caldwell stood. Your Honour, we'd like to call our final witness. Ms. Green frowned. You already submitted your witness list, Caldwell smiled. This one came forward voluntarily. The courtroom door opened, and my breath stopped. It was Ava Mitchell, Grandpa's old assistant, the woman who'd warned me about Caldwell. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between us. Caldwell greeted her warmly. Ms. Mitchell, you worked closely with Mr. Arthur Pendleton for many years, correct? Yes, she said softly. And would you say in recent years he's become forgetful? She hesitated. Sometimes. My chest tightened. Ava, I whispered. Caldwell pressed on. Did he ever misplace documents or confuse meetings? Yes, she said, voice trembling. But it was small things. That's all we need, Caldwell said with a smile. Ms. Green stood. Ms. Mitchell, did anyone contact you before this hearing? Ava looked down. Yes. Who? Mr. Pendleton. I turned to my father, disbelief burning in my throat. Ms. Green's voice sharpened. Did he offer you anything in return for your testimony? Ava hesitated again, then nodded. He said he'd restore my pension, the one that was cancelled when I retired. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. Enough, I've heard all I need. She turned to my father. Mr. Pendleton, your attempt to manipulate this court with false evidence and bribed witnesses is disgraceful. Caldwell started to speak, but the judge cut him off. And you, Mr. Caldwell, are hereby referred to the Bar Association for review. The judge paused, looking at me, then at Grandpa. I've seen many families destroy themselves over greed, she said softly. But rarely have I seen a granddaughter fight so fiercely for truth. Then she turned back to my father. The petition is denied. Effective immediately, control of the Pendleton estate remains with Mr. Arthur Pendleton, with temporary co-guardianship granted to Ms. Monique Pendleton. I felt my knees weaken. I could barely breathe. Across the room, my father stared at me. No anger now, just cold disappointment. You think you've won, he said quietly. But this was never about the money. Then what is it about? I asked. He leaned closer. You'll see soon enough. The people I brought in, they don't lose easily. Before I could answer, security escorted him out. Grandpa reached for my hand. You did it, he whispered. But even as relief washed over me, something cold lingered. My father's words echoed in my head. They don't lose easily. And I had a terrible feeling. The real war hadn't even started yet. For 2 days after the court hearing, the mansion felt like it could finally breathe again. The halls were quieter, lighter. Even the air seemed softer, as if the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Grandpa smiled more, ate better, and for the first time in months I saw him laugh, but peace is fragile. It never lasts long when powerful men lose. It started with the headlines. I was scrolling through my phone at breakfast when I saw it. Arthur Pendleton's mental health in question. Sources claim Billionaire's empire at risk. I froze. There were photos of the courthouse, my father leaving the building, and a line that made my stomach twist. Inside sources suggest the granddaughter may have manipulated legal records to gain control. I slammed the phone down. They leaked it, I whispered. Grandpa looked up, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Leaked what? The story. They're trying to turn the world against us, he sighed, setting his spoon aside. Thomas learned from me how to use perception as a weapon, but he forgot that truth has a longer life. Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was Miss Green. Monique, she said urgently. We have a problem. Someone hacked the family business servers. Financial documents, personal files, all gone. The backups too. My chest tightened. What do you mean gone? I mean deleted completely. It's not a random hack. This was professional. I closed my eyes. Hollow Creek Holdings. That would be my guess, she said. They're making sure you can't prove ownership of certain assets. Without those records, your father's partners can challenge the estate again. I hung up, my heart pounding. The war wasn't over. It had just changed shape. That afternoon, I drove to the city office where the Pendleton Foundation was registered. The manager, a nervous man with thinning hair, met me in the lobby. Ms. Pendleton, he said, we received a notice from Hollow Creek Holdings. They claim a majority interest in several of your grandfather's ventures. They've already started transferring shares. That's illegal, I said sharply. He shrugged helplessly. They have signed documents. My hands went cold. Let me see them. When he handed me the folder, my stomach dropped. The signatures were perfect. My grandfather's handwriting copied with stunning accuracy. Even his old ink stamp had been duplicated. It was fraud at a professional level. I left the building shaking. Outside, the sky was dark and low, clouds thick like smoke. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. How far would my father go? Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. You can't save what's already sold. I stared at it, my blood turning cold. I didn't reply. I just drove home, my mind racing. When I reached the mansion, the front gate was open. That was strange. Grandpa never left it open. I parked and ran inside. Grandpa? I called. No answer. The house felt wrong. The air was thick, quiet but tense. I walked through the living room. The coffee cup on the table was still warm. He had been here recently. Then I heard it. A faint sound from upstairs, like drawers being opened, furniture moved. Grandpa? Silence. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a small bronze lamp, and walked toward the staircase. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. Halfway up, I saw movement. A man stepped out of Grandpa's office, not my father, but one of the men from the court photos. "Tall suit earpiece, a corporate muscle." He froze when he saw me. "What are you doing in my house?" I demanded. He smirked. "Our house now." I swung the lamp. He dodged easily, grabbed my wrist and twisted it just enough to make me drop it. "Don't make this hard," he said. "We're just collecting property. The old man signed off on it. You forged those documents." I snapped. He shrugged. "Prove it." I struggled, but before he could push past me, a sharp voice echoed from the hallway. "Get your hands off my granddaughter." It was Grandpa, standing with his cane raised like a weapon. His voice was weaker than before, but it carried authority. The man hesitated, then muttered, "This isn't over." He brushed past me and disappeared down the stairs. I helped Grandpa sit down. "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly. "They were taking files." "Old contracts. I heard them say they're going to finish the transfer tonight." I swallowed hard. "Transfer to where?" "Offshore accounts," he said softly. "Your father must have promised them part of the estate in exchange for their help. But he's lost control now. They're taking everything, even from him." I felt a surge of rage. Then we hit them back. "We have the court order. We have digital proof, even if they deleted files. We just need one more piece." Grandpa's eyes narrowed. "What piece?"
"The video," I said.
"The one from the hidden camera, where Dad and Caldwell discussed the plan. I saved it on a flash drive, but I never checked if it recorded audio." I ran to my room, pulled out the drive and plugged it into my laptop. The video opened. This time I turned the volume up. Caldwell's voice came clear. "Once Hollow Creek gets the assets, we disappear. He'll never trace it. By the time the granddaughter finds out, it'll all be legal." My father's reply came, tight and angry. "Just make sure they leave me enough to rebuild." "I'm not doing this for scraps." Caldwell laughed. "Thomas, you don't realise you are the scrap. The audio cut off there." I sat frozen. Grandpa's prediction was right. My father was no longer in control. He was being used. I turned to him. "We can expose them. All of them. I'll leak this to every media outlet in Atlanta." He smiled faintly. "That's your grandmother's fire again." I nodded. "And this time, it's going to burn the right people." That night, I sent the audio and video to 3 trusted journalists. By morning, every major outlet had the story: Billionaire's son and legal team tied to international fraud network. The news spread fast. The mansion became surrounded by reporters. Hollow Creek's stock collapsed within hours. Caldwell's law license was suspended pending investigation, and my father, he vanished. The last message I got from him was a single line. "You think you won? But you don't know what it cost me. I didn't understand it then." But I would, soon. Morning came with noise. Reporters outside, phones ringing non-stop, messages pouring in. The story had exploded across every network. Fraud exposed. Hollow Creek Holdings under investigation. And the headline that hit hardest: Thomas Pendleton missing after major financial scandal. I stared at the TV in silence. The room around me felt too still. Grandpa sat beside me, leaning on his cane. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, "He ran." I nodded. "The FBI's looking for him. They say he might have fled the state." Grandpa's face softened, not with relief, not with anger, but something in between. "I wanted him to fight, Monique. To make peace, not disappear. He made his choice," I said, though my voice cracked. I wanted to believe my words. I wanted to stay angry. But part of me, the daughter part, still hoped he would call. By evening, the mansion was surrounded by flashing lights and camera crews. Reporters shouted questions through the gate. I turned off my phone and closed the blinds. That's when I heard it. A knock on the back door. 3 slow taps, I froze. "Monique," Grandpa whispered. "Who would come that way?" I didn't answer. I walked carefully to the door and peeked through the small window. It was him, my father. His clothes were wrinkled, his face hollow. The confident man who once stood in court with polished shoes and perfect words was gone. His eyes were red and tired, the eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days. I opened the door just enough to speak. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said quietly. "But I needed to see you." Grandpa's voice came from behind me. You have some nerve walking back in here. Dad's shoulders slumped. I deserve that. But I didn't come to fight. I came to tell you the truth before it's too late. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered slowly, his hands visible, cautious. Sit, Grandpa said coldly. Say what you need to say. Dad sat down, eyes on the floor. You think I did this for money? For pride, but you don't know how it started. Then explain it, I said. He rubbed his face. Hollow Creek wasn't my idea. It started years ago, right after Mum died. I was drowning in debt. The company I built was failing, investors leaving, and I was desperate. Caldwell introduced me to a man named Preston Vale, a silent partner who helped failing businesses. He offered me a deal. They'd erase my debts if I signed over a small percentage of Pendleton Industries when the time came. That's blackmail, I said. He nodded. At first I thought I could control it, but the deeper I got, the tighter the chains became. When Grandpa refused to include me in the estate, they turned on me. They said if I didn't deliver, they'd expose every deal I'd made. I thought if I took control legally, through the guardianship, I could buy time. I never meant to destroy him. Grandpa's voice trembled with restrained anger. And yet you almost did. Dad's eyes glistened. I know, and I've lost everything for it. For the first time in my life, he didn't look powerful. He looked human, broken. I tried to fix it, he continued. I told them to stop. That's why the house was raided. They weren't after you. They were sending me a message, I stepped forward. So what now? You think you can just confess and it'll be over? He shook his head slowly. No, it's already over for me. But not for you. He pulled a small envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Inside is the real transfer file, the one they plan to finalise tonight. It lists every offshore account, every name, every partner. I copied it before I ran. I opened the envelope. Inside was a flash drive. If you give this to the authorities, he said, it'll end them. Hollow Creek, Caldwell, Vale, all of them. But once you do, they'll come for me. Grandpa's expression was unreadable. Maybe that's justice. Dad turned to me. Maybe it is. But if I go down, they'll try to take you too. You've already embarrassed powerful people. You'll need protection. I don't need protection from the truth, I said quietly. He smiled faintly. You sound like your mother. The silence that followed was thick with things none of us could say. Regret, love, loss. Finally, he stood. I have to go before they trace me here. Where will you go? I asked. Somewhere far. Maybe I'll finally stop running from myself. He walked to the door. For a second, I almost stopped him. Almost. But some wounds don't heal with words. He turned once more and said softly, Tell your grandfather. I never hated him. I just didn't know how to stop needing his approval. Then he was gone. I stood at the window and watched him disappear down the dark road. My throat burned, but no tears came. Just emptiness. Grandpa spoke without looking at me. You have the chance to end this, Monique. Don't waste it on pity. I nodded, gripping the flash drive tight. I won't. The next morning, I handed the drive to the federal investigator who had been assigned to the case. By evening, the FBI confirmed multiple arrests. Caldwell, Preston Vale, half a dozen others. The empire of deceit fell apart piece by piece, just like the lies that built it. But my father was never found. For weeks, I dreamed of him walking away into the mist, not as a villain, but as a man trying to outrun the weight of his own choices. Grandpa never spoke his name again, but sometimes I'd catch him looking out the window at night, as if hoping to see a car on the driveway, and sometimes, so did I. Months later, the estate was secure. The house repaired. The air lighter. I took over management of the foundation, focusing on rebuilding what greed had broken. But every so often, I'd find something. A note, a photo, a memory, reminding me that the Pendleton story wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about love that twisted itself into ambition, pride that forgot tenderness, and a daughter who had to learn that justice and forgiveness are sometimes two sides of the same blade. 6 months passed. Spring had returned to Atlanta, soft and golden. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. The Pendleton mansion stood quiet again, not haunted by whispers anymore, but filled with peace. The newspapers had stopped calling. The cameras had left. Grandpa spent most of his mornings in the garden now, tending to the same roses Grandma had planted 40 years ago. Watching him there felt like seeing time forgive itself, one petal at a time. I had started to breathe again, until the day the package arrived. It came by courier, no return address. Just my name written in my father's familiar handwriting. My hands went cold as I turned it over. "Who's it from?" Grandpa asked, looking up from his newspaper. I didn't answer. I already knew. I sat down at the dining table, heart pounding, and opened the envelope. Inside was a single flash drive and a folded letter. The letter smelled faintly of his cologne, the one he wore when I was a child. The smell brought memories I didn't ask for. I unfolded it slowly. "My dearest Monique, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I won't tell you where I've gone, not because I don't trust you, but because I want you to live without looking over your shoulder. By now, you've learned the truth about Hollow Creek, about me. But there's one thing you don't know. What I gave up to start it. Years ago, before you were born, I made a deal to save my company. The price wasn't just money. It was something worse. I gave them access to our family's accounts, thinking I could manage it. But one of their conditions was to keep your grandfather isolated. They wanted him out of the picture, so they could use the Pendleton name freely. That's why I distanced myself. Why I stayed away. Every visit, every argument. It was all part of the contract. I thought I was protecting him from them. But all I did was become one of them. When I realized the damage, it was too late. They owned me. My silence, my reputation, even my time with you. You were the only thing I didn't let them touch. I know you hate me, and maybe you should. But if you can, remember this. I never wanted the mansion or the money. I just wanted to prove I wasn't a disappointment. To him, to you, to myself. The flash drive I've enclosed has everything. The last transactions, the offshore accounts, the names of everyone involved. Give it to the authorities if you haven't already. Use it to close the story the right way. And Monique, when the world looks at the Pendleton name again, don't let it be remembered for greed or guilt. Let it stand for truth, even if that truth cost me everything. Your father, Thomas. The words blurred as I read them again. My throat ached. The tears I had been holding back for months finally came, silent, hot, unstoppable. Grandpa sat quietly beside me, his expression unreadable. When I handed him the letter, his fingers trembled. He read it slowly. Halfway through, his lips pressed into a thin line. At the end, he closed his eyes. I told myself I'd never forgive him, he said softly. But maybe forgiveness isn't for him. Maybe it's for the part of me that failed him. I wiped my tears. He made terrible choices, Grandpa. But he loved us. In his own broken way. He nodded. And maybe that's enough for us to let go. That night, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It held more than evidence. It held his confession in motion. Video recordings. Voice memos. Every step of the path that led him down. In one video, he looked straight into the camera. His face was tired but peaceful. If you're watching this, Monique, I hope you found your peace. Don't carry my shame. You fought for the truth. Something I lost the courage to do long ago. The Pendleton name doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to you. Make it something clean. When the video ended, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I did something I never thought I would. I whispered, "I forgive you." It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like release. Weeks later, the FBI confirmed that Hollow Creek's remaining members were arrested abroad. The case closed. The Pendleton legacy was safe again. Life moved quietly after that. I returned to work at the foundation, turning the focus toward helping young entrepreneurs. People like my father once was before greed clouded his dreams. At the entrance of the mansion, I placed a new plaque, Pendleton House, a legacy rebuilt on truth. One evening, while watching the sunset from the garden, Grandpa said, "You've done what I never could, Monique. You turned pain into purpose." I smiled. "You taught me how," he chuckled softly. "No, your father did. He showed you what not to become. That's still a lesson, the hardest kind." We sat in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees. Then I asked quietly, "Do you think he's still out there?" Grandpa looked toward the horizon. "Somewhere," he said. Trying to make peace with the ghosts he built, I nodded. I hoped he was right. I hoped my father found some small corner of the world where the noise of his regrets finally went quiet. That night, I went through old family photos. One of them caught my eye, a picture of my father holding me as a baby, his face full of pride, his eyes bright with dreams. I smiled sadly. Then I placed it back in the drawer under the letter he'd written. The story was finally complete, not with revenge, not with hate, but with truth and the courage to face it. And in that truth, the Pendleton name found peace again. A year had passed since the storm ended. The Pendleton mansion no longer felt like a battlefield. It had become a home again, quiet, sunlit, filled with laughter from the staff and the sound of hope returning. I'd spent months rebuilding the Pendleton Foundation from the ground up. No more boardrooms full of greed. No more secret clauses or shadow partners. Just purpose. We funded small businesses, supported single mothers, and gave scholarships to students who came from nothing, just like my father once did before he lost his way. The world had moved on from the scandal. Reporters now called me the woman who saved the Pendleton name. But I didn't care about the fame. I cared about what came next. I wanted our story, my family's story, to mean something. One morning, Grandpa and I stood in front of the newly restored foundation building downtown. The sign above the door read, Pendleton Foundation for Integrity and Innovation, a legacy reborn through truth. He looked at the sign and smiled faintly. You did what I couldn't, Monique. You turned a name into something good again. I squeezed his hand. We did it together. He chuckled softly. No, child. I just planted the seed. You grew the garden. Inside, the lobby buzzed with life. Young interns setting up exhibits, volunteers arranging donation drives. It didn't look like a billionaire's empire anymore. It looked like a movement. That afternoon, I stood on stage at the grand reopening. The media were there, cameras flashing, microphones ready. But my voice was steady. Once upon a time, I said, this family's name stood for power. Then it became a symbol of pride and pain. But today it stands for something better, truth, redemption, and the courage to rebuild. The applause came soft but warm. I looked down at Grandpa in the front row, his eyes wet, his smile small but full of pride. For a moment, I saw my father there too, the way he might have been, standing proud, clapping for the daughter who carried the fire he could never tame. That night, after everyone left, I walked alone through the quiet halls of the new building. The city lights shimmered outside, reflecting off the glass walls. The sound of Atlanta at night, cars, laughter, distant music, felt like the heartbeat of a place finally alive again. I stopped at the main exhibit. The Pendleton Legacy, a family rewritten. Inside the glass case lay the original blue-ribboned letters, the same ones I found in the mansion's library, the beginning of everything. Next to them, Grandpa's cane and a framed photo of my father, younger, smiling, holding me as a baby. A small plaque beneath it read, Thomas Pendleton, dreamer, flawed, redeemed by truth. It took me weeks to decide whether to add that plaque. But in the end, I realized redemption wasn't about perfection. It was about facing the truth even too late. Outside, the night air was cool and still. I looked up at the sky, endless, peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email. No sender, no subject. Just one line of text. The roses in the West Garden are blooming again. You should see them. My heart stopped. Only 3 people ever called them the West Garden. Grandma, Grandpa, and my father. I ran inside, straight to Grandpa's room. He was sitting by the window, reading. Grandpa, I said breathlessly, did you send me this? He looked up, confused. Send what? I showed him the email. His eyes widened slightly. Then he smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. He's alive, I whispered. Grandpa nodded slowly. Maybe he is. Or maybe it's just his way of saying goodbye. I went to the garden right away. The roses were in full bloom, red and bright, shining under the moonlight. And there, tucked between 2 branches, was an envelope. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. Inside, a single note written in his handwriting. You kept your promise, Monique. You saved what mattered. Don't look for me. Just live. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I pressed the note to my heart. Goodbye. Dad, I whispered. The night breeze carried the words away, soft and final. Months later, when summer came, Grandpa passed peacefully in his sleep, a smile on his face, the blue ribboned letters resting on his bedside table. The funeral was simple, filled with stories, not sadness. I spoke last. My grandfather taught me that strength isn't in money or power, it's in what we choose to protect. My father taught me that losing your way doesn't mean you can't find it again, and I learned that truth, no matter how heavy, is always lighter than a lie. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After everyone left, I stood by his grave, feeling the wind move through the trees. For the first time in years I felt peace, not the silence that hides pain, but the kind that means you've finally forgiven life for being unfair. A year later, the foundation expanded across states. The Pendleton name appeared again, in classrooms, scholarships, small business grants. But now it stood for something different, something honest, and every time I visited the West Garden, I left a single rose at the spot where I found his letter, a promise to keep living, just as he asked. Sometimes I still wondered where he was. But then I'd look around, at the young faces we helped, the families we saved, and realise maybe he was here, in the echoes of every good thing born from the ashes of his mistakes. The mansion, the name, the legacy, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was what it became, a story that taught me the most important lesson of all, that revenge can end a cycle, but forgiveness begins a new one, and that's how the Pendleton story ended, not in fire, but in light.